All right, welcome everyone. It's the top of the hour. It's great to be here with you for this final session of today's retreat for the Catholic National Athletic Association. It's good to see your faces, and I'm excited to be here with you. I'm going to begin, as I'm sure you all begin things in your school communities, with a prayer. And so this is a prayer entitled Run So As to Win. Say in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, through St. Paul, you admonish us to run so as to win in our athletic pursuits, while keeping our eyes on the eternal glory of heaven. May we always take the lessons we learn in sports and use them to help us grow in faith, hope, and love. Help us to follow the example of your saints who showed great courage and proclaimed your glory no matter the cost. We lift our prayers to you and ask that you bless our school communities, our teams, our coaches, and most especially our athletes. Help us to strive to use our talents to the best of our abilities and to glorify you in doing so. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Okay, welcome everyone to the Play Like a Champion clinic. I am going to introduce myself first of all. I'm Kristen Sheehan, and I have been the program director for Play Like a Champion since the program's inception, which was in 2006. And just a little bit about me personally, I am a Notre Dame graduate. My undergraduate degree is in theology with concentrations in both gender studies and peace studies. When I was there as an undergraduate, I was a varsity athlete on the cheerleading team and went on to get my master's in psychology. More close to me is the fact that I am a spouse of 30 years and I am a mom of three basically grown children, although they're never really grown. And I was a coach for them in a number of their sports, traditional sports, but also coached them in my sport growing up, which was gymnastics. I'm so thrilled to be here with you and excited to share Play Like a Champion's approach to holistic development through the sport experience so that we're developing athletes as whole people and as excellent athletes. But before we get started with the approach, we're going to have a little fun. Now, our approach, you'll see, relies heavily on joy and playfulness. And so we're going to start out with a little playful competition. And there is a prize for the winner of the competition, right? Because we all love a little swag, and our Play Like the Champion mantra is a pretty cool one. So I know you want to walk away with this hat that's shown here on the screen. And what I'm going to do for our competition is I'm going to play a song. Now, those of you who are about my age will know that in the 70s, there was a PBS show called Zoom. How many people know that? Raise your hand. Oh, come on, Anthony. I know you have to know that. You're about my age. You didn't watch PBS Zoom? Okay, well, then it just goes to show I'm the oldest one on this call, so I'm enlightening you already. Now, we're all very familiar with Zoom, and we're zoomed out, but here's a new perspective on Zoom. I'm going to play the theme song for you, and while the theme song of Zoom is playing, I want you to type into the chat a sentence that creatively uses the word Zoom. And the person with the most creative, most inventive, funnest sentence is going to be the winner of this hat. My colleague, Pete Pisticello, who's on the call here, he's a director with me. He's going to be our judge. So here comes the song. And get this going for you. Let's go. Let's do it. Yeah. Come on and do, 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 come on, come on and do, come on and do, come on and do, come on and do, come on and do,
you. Come on, give it a try. And if you like what you see, turn off the TV and do it. Do, 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 do. Come on and do, 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 do, Zumba, do. Come on and do, come on and do, come on and do, come on and do, come on and Zumba, 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 do.
Sometimes you
All right, nobody put anything yet. Maybe we just have a slow connection here, Pete. Anyone want to give it a try? Word sentence with the word Zoom. We got a couple here. All right, keep them coming in, folks, and we will let Pete announce the decision in the next few minutes as everyone's had a chance to do it. Now, I wanted to say a word, and that word is coach. When I say that word coach, who do you automatically think of and why? And so as soon as you're done typing your Zoom sentence, go ahead and type the name of a coach who you remember and why. And since we're athletic directors on this conversation, perhaps your coach was an athletic director who coached you into your administrative position. So go ahead and type that in the chat. And then instead of kind of waiting to the end of this session, I'm going to really be engaging conversation throughout so that we're having a conversation. The purpose of this retreat, I believe, is to take time to reflect, to become the best version of ourselves. And so to us at Play Like a Champion, we think that's not about a lecture, but it's about sharing and talking and making it real for ourselves. And so while you're typing in the name of that coach, I'd like to see those coaches' names populate the chat. Also, anybody willing to unmute and talk about their coach that was impactful to them? I got one in from Melissa so far. David Carmichael, he was the first coach that took time out to get to know me and tell me there was more to life than being an athlete. So Melissa, you want to unmute and share a little more about that?
Yes, give me 1 second. I need to close my office door.
Okay.
For myself, when I was in high school, I didn't have the best coaching experience. And Coach Carmichael took the time out to get to know me as an individual. And he also allowed me to bring my individuality to the sport that we were playing. He was my basketball coach. And it was because of him that I got an opportunity to go play at the next level and play at the college level past my JUCO years. And he was just a true inspiration. So when it came time for me to want to be a coach, he was definitely the inspiration behind it.
All right, thank you for sharing, Melissa. So a coach who saw the best in you, not just athletically, but personally, and empowered you to excel athletically. All right, thank you. I see one of the people here said that it was an anonymous coach who motivated me through negativity. You don't have to, Anthony, but do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. I think this coach probably could have used Play Like a Champion when I was in high school, because I'm not quite sure he actually really knew my name because he called me everything else. So he just never had faith in me, and I always had to prove myself. And and I was, the only African-American kid on the baseball team. So there were a lot of different things that were occurring that, made me feel that I did not belong. But, my faith and my parents got me through that. And I managed to, probably to his dismay, I managed to get a scholarship. And now here I am having coached baseball and doing the things that I'm doing now. I actually returned to his house one day and knocked on his door and had a whole long conversation about his impact. And he teared up and he said, "You were always my favorite player." And I said, you had a hard way showing it, my friend. But so now we're trying to mend that relationship.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Anthony. Coaches, as we all know, as their athletic directors, have an immense impact. Coaches are leaving a legacy. And when we talk with coaches, we remind them that that legacy can be for the positive or it could be for the negative. I mean, so many times when I'm having a session with coaches, some of the coaches will actually cry remembering the harm their coach did to them. And so through that negativity, it motivated them to become involved in athletics. And so, we're here to say there's a better way. We can be positively motivational. And how can our coaches decide to leave that legacy from a positive impact? And so, again, this is a retreat, and we want you to think about your legacy. Now, you are an athletic director, and so you are really coaching the coaches. And so you are leaving a legacy with your coaches. And our question for you to first reflect on is, what do you hope your administrative legacy will be? What do you want your coaches to remember about you when they reflect back? And I am posting in the chat a link to something called a Coaching for Character game plan. This is something that we feel very strongly about because psychologists have studied what motivates people to really change and live up to their goals. And a really key part of that is to write those goals so that we can track them, we can edit them, and we can follow our progress to those goals. And so in any coaching clinic we do and any work that you do with your coaches, we'd encourage you to write goals, write intentions. And that's what I'm providing you here today, is a game plan that I've adapted for this session. And if you just want to download that, I ask you to take the time today to reflect upon the questions that I'll be asking. I've left in everything we tend to ask coaches based on our coach clinic, but I've highlighted the questions that I'm going to ask you to take the time to reflect upon to become your best self, to become your best athletic administrator. Again, it's a retreat, so let's reflect and decide how we want to be our best. And so the first question is, what do you want your legacy to be? I was struck, if anybody was in the previous session, that was a question that was given to the panelist. Who was your most impactful coach? We all have them. And so our question is, what will make you the most impactful administrator? Now, while you're taking the time to, and there's a picture of the game plan, so you can see what course we'll be charting. And then while you're doing that, I just want to give you just a little bit of background on this approach to character development through sport. We offer a comprehensive design for coaches, parents, athletes, whole teams. And the key to be running a successful athletic program is to connect the athletic department mission to the vision of the school and the mission of the school. And so we view athletics as co-curricular, not extracurricular. And so how do you intentionally fulfill the school's mission where you work? Every Catholic school has a distinct mission. And it's our responsibility to ensure that we are following that mission, but also how are we educating our coaches? If your coaches are in the building, they probably know the mission, but maybe not. And if they're not in the building, they really need to have an awareness raised as to that mission. And so kind of a first takeaway is, do your coaches know your school mission? And do they know how they can fulfill that mission through their athletic coaching, through their teams? Do they even know that that's their responsibility? Another thing to talk about in athletic administration is when you're hiring coaches, are you sharing the whole aspect of coaching and that it is co-curricular, not just extracurricular? Do you talk about the charisms of your school, the mission of the school, the spirituality of your school, and set that as an expectation that the coaches will focus on in their time? Ask them questions about it. how would you fulfill this mission? So you have some insight as to whether they're ready to embrace the responsibility of that Catholic school culture. Now, our approach is research-driven, based in Catholic theology, educational development, moral development theory, and sports psychology. It's a privilege to bring it to you. The whole goal is to work to develop the whole athlete, emotionally, socially, morally, spiritually, and certainly athletically through sport. So when you attend to the whole athlete, you develop the physicality of that athlete as well. Okay, now we're going to go back to, well, what we're going to do is we're going to follow our mantra, play like a champion today, and we're going to start with play. And so we started with a little playfulness here and had some fun with our learning and our development. And so I'm going to ask Pete for the winner of our contest, our Zoom contest.
Our winner is Tommy Lara. Tommy is the winner. Tommy, if you put your, send a message in the chat to either Kristen or I, play like a champion in the chat there with an address we can send that to, we'll send you a hat. Thanks, Tommy.
Tommy, what was your sentence?
Let's see. Let me scroll up in the chat. I said, let's zoom out of this pandemic.
Amen to that, Tommy. I'm with you.
Right?
Oh boy. Okay, so we're going to talk about play, and on the screen here you see a quote from St. Pope John Paul II, and that is, sport is meant to be a game, a celebration, and the joy of life. And I'm going to ask Pete to share a few resources with you in the chat that you may find helpful. We've put together, I'm sure many of you already know this, but in case you haven't, I'm going to put the link, Pete's going to put the links in the chat. In June of 2018, the Vatican released a document on sport called Giving the Best of Yourself, a rich document that outlines the vision for our church to run a holistic-based sport program. That document will really guide you in your work as an athletic administrator. And Play Like a Champion's philosophy really flows from what that document laid out. Additionally, Pope Francis has had a number of things to say about sport. And so we compiled some of those richest resources and we put them into a document. This might be helpful to you to share with your coaches as you communicate to them. Maybe put in a Pope Francis quote prior to the communication, or when you're hosting a meeting, you might want to share some of the quotes so that not only is your school's mission front and center with your coaches, but also acknowledging that our church sees the incredible value in sport for the integral development of the human person. And so with that, I am going to launch our first poll. So you get a chance to answer a question here. And while you're answering that question, I'm going to set the context up for sport is play. So we believe that sports are games. Well, hopefully we all believe sports are games that are meant to be played with joyfulness, in zeal, with energy and excitement. And sometimes from our research, we see that adults, whether they be coaches or parents, can drain the fun and the joy out of the game and make it all work. Now, I'm not negating that sports are hard work. Absolutely, we got to work hard to get better. And yet, how do we make the hard work joyful as we strive together as a team, as a unit, in a great spirit, in a great energy, and we see ourselves improve through the hard work? That's fun, and that's joy. And so I just wanted to ask the question, go back here, does having fun get in the way or enhance performance? And I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results here. Alrighty, let's see. We have, does having fun get in the way? So 71% say no, 30% say yes. So now I'm going to invite somebody, either whether you said no or yes, just unmute and tell us how you feel about this. this idea of fun and joy either enhancing or getting in the way of performance?
I'll share on mine. Tommy Laura here from Salesian High School. I actually put I put yes, and I think and I put that because I think it all depends on the mission of your athletics program, and with that, it encompasses a whole bunch of things. Like what are the expectations of your school administration, the type of league that you're playing in, and just a whole bunch of factors. And I've kind of seen it in both lights through previous administrations. My tenure at the school, where I don't like saying this, but it's just like, I don't want to say it was like a winning like at all cost type situation, but there was a lot of emphasis on at one point on winning, on trying to make your programs the best that they can be. And I think when you kind of you put that mentality into your into your school culture, into your coaches in a sense, it kind of rubs. Obviously, it's going to rub off on the athletes, and when it comes off on the athletes, it really takes that fun aspect out of it, because you have people who are whether you're paying, I'm not saying we do, but we play against schools where their coaches are getting paid top dollar, and you either win or lose, or depend it's going to determine whether you keep your job or not. And then on the on the flip side of it, though, it's just like when you do have that coach who goes out there with the passion for what they do, and is able to find that balance of obviously that winning, and also just making sure that the kids are having some type of fun. It just kind of works out at the end, though. But yeah, so sorry for that little tangent at the end, but
Thanks, Tommy.
you know
Just a little preview to what we're going to talk about a little bit is our GROW approach for motivation and achieving success on the field. And the W in the GROW is for, you guessed it, winning. Believe me, we want to win. Sure, winning's fun too. And yet, if we only look at winning as the scoreboard, we've lost our soul. We've lost our soul. We've got to see winning as broader than just the final score. And that's the approach that we're going to be talking about. And so back to this idea of getting in the way of or enhancing sport performance is that all the psychological research will show that in order to have a peak performance, athletes need to be confident and loose and uninhibited and intrinsically motivated, enjoying their sport experience to reach that peak performance. And the peak performance we're calling a flow experience. Now, flow was a concept that was coined by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he was studying happiness, and he found that what is it that causes people to feel happy? And he coined this opportunity as flow as an optimal human experience, which a person is completely and happily absorbed in what he or she is doing. And then they're opened up to have a peak performance. And so the joy of the sport is intrinsically linked with a peak performance, with a flow experience. And so anybody want to, I hope you've had the chance to be in a flow experience, whether as an athlete yourself, whether as a coach, even as a spectator, we can hit a flow experience. Would anyone want to unmute and talk about that experience specifically, or maybe it's just some of the characteristics that experience included?
Hi, Kristen. It's Carolyn. As the years get farther behind me, the remembering of this flow experience gets more and more romanticized, I might add. But flow experience, sweet spot, we use a lot of terms for this, but the one that I will keep close to my heart was actually officiating a high school championship game, a high school basketball championship game. And everything was so easy, and everything was so almost like a dreamlike situation. And I think, like, we as a crew, I worked with 2 other females in this crew, so I was already on this kind of positioned into a space where I was really open to that flow experience. And then with the stimulus of thousands of people in the stands, school bands playing, all that stuff, and yet I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear anything. All I could see the players. Everything was so clear. I think we called like 1 foul the whole half. The play was so magically amazing, and I think like that that is one flow experience that I remember in sports, and it fuels me still today with that.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
I rarely hear of an officiating flow experience, so that broadens me. Thank you very much. And what is always in common when someone describes their flow experience is they're smiling, because it's a happy place. And it's an flow, by Csikszentmihalyi said, it's autotelic. It's so happy. We are motivated to get in that place again. And so when kids are happily absorbed in their activity, again, the play is critical in and of itself. They'll want to put forth the work to get back there and back there and back there again. And so there are a few things that flow is accompanied by. And by the way, flow can be reached through a number of things. It's very common to have the opportunity to get there in sport, but you can also get there from a musical performance, maybe writing a paper, delivering a speech. If you ever read any of the mystics, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Norway, they are mystics, and they will mimic a flow experience in their language as if it's a peak performance, a peak athletic performance. They're sweating, they lose sense of time and place. They're completely and utterly absorbed. And so here are the common characteristics of flow: loss of time and self, intense focus, effortlessness, complete control, full confidence, and it results in a peak performance. And so the takeaway for coaches and for you as athletic administrators, how can you mimic these things so that your athletes get into a peak performance, but also your coaches, so that they can have the full confidence and the control to do their best for their teams? Now, we believe that the spirituality comes out in the athletic experience through flow. And so there are many spiritual elements in this, intrinsically related to this experience. Flow, the word itself connotes the idea of being carried along. It's effortless. All of your training kicks in and it takes over automatically. That's a spiritual moment. And it happens when you call attention to God's presence in that moment. It can enrich the experience even more. The idea of flow is accompanied by a sense of grace and surrender. You surrender to your training, to the experience, to the team experience. Carolyn shared about a team flow where your whole team of officiating was moving together. Phil Jackson talks about that in his book, how his team would get into sync and flow together. Many times it's an individual experience, but in all cases, it's a chance to overcome boundaries. And I told you we'd follow the mantra, play like a champion today. And we've talked about play as critical to making your athletes and your coaches their best. And this idea of flow is the idea of today. We think of it as the word kairos. So the ancient Greeks had 2 words for time. One was chronos, which was chronological time, where you could watch the minutes on the clock pass. You can watch the days in a season progress. But the Greeks had another word for time, and that was kairos. And kairos was an opportunity to become one's best self, an opportunity for God to act through the athlete to give the best of him or herself, which is the title of that Vatican document. Kairos is an opportunity for your coach to become his or her best in loving, in supporting, in encouraging, and developing his or her athletes. And so we could just say play like a champion, but we say play like a champion today. And that brings the spirituality and the grace into the sport experience. And so to wrap up this idea of spirituality and sport, we have a quote here from Hugo Rahner, who is a theologian. He says, to play, he's talking about the spirituality of play. To play is to yield oneself to a type of magic. We know magic moments happen in sport all the time, and we yield to that magic. That's a spiritual moment, and God's presence is there in that magic. And to play is to enter a world where different laws apply. Sports have very disciplined rules and a disciplined structure, and it's within that structure that athletes are allowed their best opportunity to excel, to become their best. And to play is to be free, kingly, unfettered, and experience a bit of the divine. And so my question for you now is, how do you bring faith and spirituality onto your teams? We're in with your coaches in your coaching community. If anyone would like to unmute, I invite you to do so. Please feel free to talk over me, but I'll just put a little more context here. There's because we walk into a Catholic school, there's nothing that says that we will live our Catholic values through our athletics. Right? Just like there's nothing that says putting on a uniform will imbue an athlete with character. It really depends on how the program is run, how it's administered, how the coaches lead the teams. And so we need to be intentional about living the school's mission from a Catholic faith perspective or a spirituality perspective. Any ideas on how you do that?
Well, I can go.
Thanks, Andrew.
Sorry if I'm like whispering a little bit. I have some girls doing studying. I'm supervising them in our cohort, but
We hear you loud and clear.
yeah,
You're good.
perfect. The one thing that I think I want to try to do, or I've told my coaches that I wanted them to do. It's been hard since we haven't had any sports, but intentionally like praying before. I think just praying before each practice, each game, after each practice, whenever they come together, whenever they leave, just not taking those little moments for granted. And I think that, it sets up, the ability of spirituality to come in is if you intentionally pray before, when you come together and when you leave. It's something that I've done. I've been at Catholic school in high school. I went to a faith-based school, and every time we would just pray, and it brought that spirituality in. So I think, as simple as it is, just pushing your coaches to pray, before practice, after practice. I think that goes a long way to just kind of build spirituality in your teams.
Thank you. And absolutely, that is the first step, is prayer. It's not just an opportunity. It's really should be a responsibility of our coaches, and for us to lead them to understand that powerful responsibility. And I love what you said, is to pray before and after practices and games. And so the Bible tells us God is the Alpha and the Omega. So we should sandwich our practices, our competitions, in the presence of Christ with that prayer before and after. And so that's step one. And Pete is posting in the chat some resources that we offer. We have on our website daily prayers for champions. There's 365 different prayers that are sorted by type: prayers for coaches, prayers for parents, prayers for teams, prayers when an athlete is injured. So you can search through that to get a variety of prayers for use on your team. I would also suggest a few other resources that you can use. Start with the prayer and then keep it going. Don't just let it go there. We're going to talk very soon about character and virtue in sport. And one way to encourage that faith and spirituality is by pointing out when you see the prayer lived, when you see faith lived, when you see someone being kind to another athlete, when you see an opponent being humble on a victory, point that out, because that's faith in action. Now, some other things you can do, in addition to the daily prayers on our website, we also offer sports stations of the cross with athletic reflections. So Lent is coming up very soon, and Pete he's posted that in the chat. That's something that we offer exclusively to our partners, and we're sharing that with you today. And so what we've had teams do is pray that station where it's taking them through the course of Jesus progressing to his crucifixion and resurrection. And there's an athletic reflection on what Jesus was experiencing at that moment. You can just simply pray the sports stations and walk through them, or you can perhaps do them in a gym and engage some conditioning as a team. So you can go through the first station and then do 50 push-ups together as a team. Second station, do 50 burpees as a team, and so forth. So really important resource to use during Lent. And what prayer does as a team is it has a couple of ancillary results, and that is it brings the team together in a very cohesive manner. And if before a competition your team is experiencing anxiety, prayer has a calming effect that employs some perspective on the whole experience as well. So you'll have some positive physical outcomes to the spiritual practice of prayer as well. We also offer athletic reflections on the mysteries of the rosary. So when the month of May rolls around, you might be interested in tapping that resource. We offer a retreat rubric. Take your team on a retreat. Have the members of the team create the retreat so that there's a lot of ownership on the team's part. Dedicate your team to a saint. Perhaps it's the saint that your school is dedicated to, or perhaps you choose Saint Sebastian, who is the patron saint of athletes. Read the story of Saint Sebastian and talk about how and why your athletes might relate to his story. All of you have coaches who select or have their teams choose captains for their sport team. We suggest that you create another leadership role for your athletes, and that is of a chaplain. Some teams will have an adult chaplain, but why not have one of the athletes fill that role? And the chaplain becomes responsible for the spiritual life of the team. And they can do that in coordination with you as the coach, or they can create their own chaplain committee on the team. In the Theological Virtues are faith, hope, and charity. And charity is service. Engaging in a service project as a team is an intentional way of living your faith and your spirituality with your team. And so have your chaplain and your captain come together and decide what service project your team wants to be involved in. Go to a team mass together as a team. Another interesting twist on praying with your team, rather than their Father, the Hail Mary, or a prayer that we're suggesting, is intercessions. Go around the circle and ask everyone to ask for an intercession. What's on their heart? What do they need personal prayer for? This will also help you to get to know what's going on, get to know your athletes and what's going on in their lives. So here's a chance to write in your game plan. How can you encourage your athletic directors, or excuse me, as athletic directors, how can you encourage your coaches? How can you provide them with additional resources to know how to intentionally bring faith and spirituality to their teams this season? All right, now as you're finishing up that, I'd like you to think about this idea. So we've talked about play and talked about today. So we've got to fill in this word champion. And so if you think of the most important quality, characteristic of a champion, type it in the chat. Just one, because I want to see, try to get those in there quickly, to get it populated quickly. What is a champion? What are the characteristics, the qualities of a champion? And while I'm waiting for those to populate, I'd like to give a little context on this. Very often when I talk to athletes, when we do athlete retreats or athlete leadership sessions, their first response will be hardworking, determination, persistent. And absolutely, those are important characteristics of a champion. And those are what we would call, from a moral perspective, achievement-related characteristics. And these are things that really an athlete will come to understand that I've got to employ these in order to get better. All right. But there are other characteristics of a champion that have to do with moral issues, that have to do with social and emotional issues. And these will really depend on how the coach leads the team. Because you can have a very hardworking, very driven, very persistent team, and even a very cohesive team, but they might be rallied around poor or immoral values. They might think it's okay to cheat. And so we want to encourage all aspects of a champion. So let's see, Adam says a clutch player. I think that's probably an achievement related value, a player who comes through in the clutch. And I love that. We send out weekly notes, and one of our notes this year was about the clutch player. What is it that causes a player to be the difference maker in a high pressured position? Melissa says disciplined. This also, I would say, is an achievement related value, disciplined and structured, even when times get tough. Andrew says a leader. This is more of a moral value, right? I mean, because we could have an athlete who's only concerned about self, is self-centered, self-focused, and that wouldn't be a good team leader. And so let me go through, keep populating those in the chat. I'm going to go through what we have included here on our slide. So a champion shows persistence and determination. These are the achievement related values. Is a good teammate. These are the social values. And desires to win, strives to win, but to do so in the right way. So this is the moral value, integrity. And so as athletic directors, how are you encouraging your coaches to support the entire holistic sense of a champion, where it's excellence in athletic performance and character? Okay, now I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to show this, and I want to get wrapping up and see if there are any questions. This is a team exercise. What we just did, you can have your athletic directors do with their team. Have everyone on the team go around and name a characteristic of a champion, and all of a sudden, your team has a self-created team culture. Have we lived up to our values of becoming a champion? Really, really tangible tool you can use. And now I'm going to close with our Play Like a Champion approach to develop that whole champion. And we call it GROW. GROW is based on self-determination theory, which is a psychological theory of motivation. The psychologist said, what is it that motivates athletes to put forth their best efforts and to strive to achieve their personal best? And psychologists found that when people feel competent, connected, and in control, they are more motivated to strive and with their best effort. And so we put those into sport language. Coaches need to set intentional goals to build competence in athletes. And goals will be at the team level and the individual level. Coaches can build good relationships on their team by building a trusting relationship with each of their athletes, by forming a cohesiveness and a family unit on the team. And ownership is giving the game back to the kids, giving them a sense of control over their own play rather than all coach dictated. And that equals the desire to strive to win in a holistic way, to be successful. And so I was going to go through and ask how you would do this with your athletic department and with your coaches. How do you set up goals with your coaches? How do you build relationships with your team of coaches? And how do you give them ownership so that they are in control of their coaching process? And so Oh, I just got a note. There's no one that follows you. If you wanted to run longer, feel free to do so. Okay, what I'll do then is maybe what I'll do is I'll just open it up for conversation. You've got a really our approach here in an overarching way, and so let's just have a chat. And if you guys want to talk about any element of grow, be happy to do so.
I love silence, Kristen, because I think like we're still in here, right? In our head
Yeah.
sometimes, but if I could,
And excuse me, Carolyn, yes, you
Yeah.
can, but I want to say silence is okay.
yeah,
Because when you start to ask questions of your teams, they might be surprised that the coach is engaging their opinion. And so there might be a little silence, right? And so it's okay to be with this silence and just let people absorb and respond as they're able.
yeah, because I think this is, I think back to when I've done things similar to this, right? Asking those questions, and then I have, a team, each one of their faces, looking at me like, what should I say? Like what's the right answer,
Right.
coach? And I think, and then now we do that on Zoom, right? When we're trying to figure out those things. But yeah, I love this initially. Yeah, my I love acronyms. I love the whole connection to what I think also is like a relatively easy connection, right, to our values and to our Catholic faith and our Catholic teaching, and yet I think where I kind of pause is in the hard work that it takes to address that with our coaching staff, right? Because then we have to encounter ourselves and we have to encounter each other as the adults, as competitive coaches, as our program leads. And so I think like in that unfurling of what we really owe to our student athletes, right? I think sometimes we get in our own way with that. So those are my initial thoughts.
Just a comment. Remember, Carolyn, that engaging in goal setting, building positive relationships, and giving the athletes ownership, your teams will physically win more.
Right. Oh yeah. Like, yeah,
Right.
redefining winning already is something I think that'll the programs that I've been a part of already, I think that's the one characteristic that I look for. So, or that I've found myself in, and the kids already know that, right? That whose standards of winning, like they have to establish their ownership of what the definition is of winning. So I think like that's the hard sell, I think, for some coaches, because they already come into this with their own sense of self. So how do we like how do we integrate the two, or all these different parts,
And that's
to
where
get that connection?
Right. And that's where you come in as athletic administrators, is you encourage the integration of faith values and, through the goal setting, through the relationship building, and through allowing the athletes their personal control. So they have the social emotional space to create a winning experience.
Yeah.
So always put that emphasis on that. So Anthony, you have your hand raised.
Yep, just wanted to share kind of what we do, and we take great pride in the relationships that we build with our student athletes. But we have what we call goal meetings, but it's GOLE, and it's a combination of goal and role. because we want to talk with our kids. We meet our kids before the season starts, and we talk about not only their personal goals and what the team goals are, but what their role on the team will be, or what we see it to be right now, and how they could possibly enhance their role. Um, but having the kids understand what they go, what going into the season, where they're at, is really important. um, GOLE stands for goals, our personal goals, but opportunity, leadership, and excellence. And so we go through those steps with our student athletes in those one-on-one meetings. We're small school, 550 students. So I know all of my student athletes. I take great pride in that. And the coaches know, their kids pretty well. So we do take that time to meet individually with student athletes, and get that all in place. So when we start the year, we're all on the same page, and then we move forward in that way. So, kind of like grow, and what we do, obviously as a play like a champion, proud member, we take those type of resources, and then make it fit for our situation, and so we do that. So I also suggest that you make sure and you ask your coaches to, we do end of season evaluations with each player, and we tell the player, here's where you're at, here's what you need to do in the off season to enhance your role, or what we're expecting of you for next year. So there's clear lines of communication. um, we treat them like young adults, and recognizing that they are teenagers, but we have adult conversations with them about expectations and where they want to be, and building that relationship. There's that trust there. They know we're here, in essence, to make them the best version of themselves that they can be. And my emphasis with my coaching staff has always been, we've been fortunate as a program to be pretty successful, but none of that matters if our kids don't leave here wanting to care, serve, and love others. We haven't done our job. So that's our emphasis. Um, and if we're able to do that, and we win a few games, then that's great. But we have to care, serve, and love others as our focus.
Thanks for that, Anthony. I going to leave you with two more things. One of the things that we talk about is that you should have we encourage coaches to have moral discussions with their team. And a moral discussion can be on any topic, from setting the team rules together, to setting the team goals, to talking about race, talking about gender. And so Pete is going to post in the chat for you some rules. If you maybe on the sessions yesterday, you might have already received them, but we have guidelines for peace circles. And that's an excellent way to run a team discussion, because it gives the ownership to each and every athlete for the process, and it moves to a decision, a team decision at the end. The key to the moral discussion is the ownership. Instead of the coach lecturing or talking, the coach is just asking questions, and the team is discovering the answers. So Pete's going to post that for you. We also are hosting a webinar tomorrow on conversation about racism through sport. We'd like to invite you to attend that. And what I'm going to leave you with is somewhat of a prayer. We talk about the cardinal virtues as important. And St. John Paul II was the one who put that thought into our mind, because he said we can develop the cardinal virtues through sport. And the cardinal virtues are the core virtues of a moral life. They date back to Aristotle. And yet St. Thomas Aquinas brought them into the Catholic tradition, and they're in our Catholic catechism as the core virtues of a moral life. And the cardinal virtues relate to the elements of grow. And so goals, when you think about that, is related to the cardinal virtue of fortitude, hard work, determination, courage to persist despite odds. And then relationships relates to the cardinal virtue of justice, which is about respect, fair due for each person. And ownership relates to prudence. Prudence is about being able to make wise decisions. for the right reasons, even when the coach isn't looking. And then finally, winning relates to temperance, which is about balance and perspective. And so when we're, as coaches, encouraging the grow approach, we're also rooting our athletes in virtue that creates a moral person. And so that's my closing prayer, is that you can have the opportunity to share these virtues with your coaches, to encourage them to be mission driven in their coaching process, to create excellent athletes, but also athletes of character and faith. Thank you very much, everyone. And our contact information is in the chat. And so if there was something left unsaid, be happy to engage you through email or phone. Give us a call.